So I'm aware I am far from the first person to make a video about Emerald Rogue, but I want to make sure this ROM hack gets its flowers because it is the antithesis to nearly everything wrong with the modern Pokemon brand for me.
What's going on?
If you've just been cryogenically unfrozen from the year 1995 and you don't know what a Pokemon is, we'll give you a brief refresher on how the games work. Mainline Pokemon games generally follow a very static formula, for better or for worse. Get your starter, dumpster your rival, go through gyms 1 through 8, and take down some sort of paramilitary criminal organization along the way. Average Japanese 10-year-old stuff. This is the same society that sends toddlers to the grocery store and expects fully grown men to create Destructo discs, so I guess you've got to start somewhere. To boil down a Pokemon game to just the gym run may be diminutive of what makes the games appealing to a lot of people. Yes, the end goal is to complete the game by beating the gyms in the Elite Four, but to a lot of people, it's more about the journey than the destination. A lot of people enjoy Pokemon games, modern or classic, for stuff like the music, the creature design, the team building and competition, or the world building. With that being said, abstracting the Pokemon games down to their most basic level, it is about beating all 8 gyms and then the Elite Four with your preferred group of Pokemon, right? Emerald Rogue takes this minimalist Pokemon gameplay formula and turns it into a roguelike, akin to something like The Binding of Isaac, Risk of Rain 2, Hades, or Slay the Spire, just to name a few. The idea of a Pokemon roguelike goes back pretty far. It's kind of been like murmured about for years, in part due to stuff like Nuzlocke challenges and ironmon challenges, which turn mainline series Pokemon games into roguelites through brute force with really brutal self-imposed rules like permadeath and game over, changing the way the game is played. Nuzlocke challenges are absolutely ancient. They date back all the way to 2010, if you can believe it. They're still really popular to this day, though, in part to content creators absolutely farming them. Those pesky content creators, right? Some people play Nuzlocke with just the bare minimum rule set, that being a feint, meaning your Pokemon dies in real life, and you're only able to catch 1 Pokemon per route, usually the first one encountered.
Spaghetti!
Other people opt for harder rule sets for Nuzlocke that include randomizing Pokemon or limiting the amount that you can heal. Nicknaming Pokemon in the Nuzlocke is always encouraged to strengthen the emotional bond that gets ripped away whenever your Pokemon dies. Nuzlocke were fun for me for a while, but eventually they kind of wore out their welcome for me once the grinding for levels part really started to rear its ugly head. Pokemon games aren't really meant for you to be switching out team members that often. They're not really built for it. So, especially after you lose a team member and have to train a new one, the grinding for levels can get really monotonous in Nuzlocke, even if it is sort of fun to play the game a little bit differently, because you will be playing the game differently, but losing a Pokemon or two can kind of lead to a cycle where you're just going to keep playing really scared with all your Pokemon because you don't want to grind, you don't want to have to go back to grinding. So that was a really frustrating part of Nuzlocke for me, where you lose a Pokemon and then end up playing really terrible because you don't want to sentence yourself to grind later, which makes you play even worse. So it's just like a self-fulfilling cycle.
Just so you know, this isn't personal.
Anyways, Nuzlocke are fun. They're okay. They're okay for a bit, but they wore out their welcome for me after a while. Regardless, Nuzlocke remain a really popular challenge for Pokemon fans to play through the game today, and I think aspects of it, like team building with limited Pokemon and permadeath in mind, no doubt inspired people to imagine what a Pokemon roguelike could be like. The other challenge I mentioned, Ironmon, emerged later as an alternative to Nuzlocke that was a little bit harder. Ironmon challenge runs feature randomized movesets, randomized Pokemon stats and items, no shopping for items, and all trainer and wild Pokemon levels increased by 50%. This pretty much turns Pokemon into a roguelike that forces you to recognize your Pokemon's strengths, weaknesses, and play around them, arguably even more so than a Nuzlocke due to Ironmon's randomized stats, move pools, and abilities. Generally, if people randomize a Nuzlocke, they only stick to randomizing just the Pokemon, and they'll keep all those stats and stuff the same. So the unfamiliarity of how your Pokemon works in an Ironmon kind of ramps up the difficulty and makes you more uncomfortable, forcing you to try new options. But the only problem with that for me is the crushing difficulty of even a standard Ironmon run. Since Ironmon has rules like raised Pokemon levels, limited XP, and limited Pokemon, the game is really, really, really unforgiving and punishing, and it's honestly just not very fun to play at all. I mentioned that the game forces you to try new options, but that new option is usually like your Hail Mary to save the run. And it doesn't work. Boom, you gotta reset another ROM, reset another save file because you need a new randomized set of starter Pokemon. Most runs for me ended at Oak's Lab, where Gary Oak's starter Pokemon would absolutely dunk on me, would absolutely smoke my starter just because his starter was slightly higher level, even if I had a good starter. Occasionally, I would make it out of Oak's Lab and then get defeated by some trainer who had like 2 or 3 Pokemon, and I would lose to him because I couldn't heal mid-fight. So, not very fun in my opinion. I played about 100 runs or so of Ironmon a few years ago, and I think I made it to Viridian Forest like once or twice before I called it quits. Like I said, I enjoyed the concept that Ironmon was going for, but I thought that the insane difficulty and monotony of even the easier rule sets was like, it just made the whole thing very unpleasant. Like I said, that was standard Ironmon. There's even harder. Well, like I said, I know it's not meant to be fun per se, but it just, why would anyone ever play this? But besides, because the concept of it was novel at the time. I'm far from the smartest Pokemon player, so take my opinion on like difficulty with a grain of salt. But I would consider playing through the beginning of Fire Red, dialogue and all, with no speed up 100 times to be not fun. But I think like Nuzlocke, it's kind of an interesting example of like a early proto Pokemon roguelite. Well, the concept of a Pokemon roguelite hit the mainstream with the absolute explosion of pokerogue in mid-2024. Emerald Rogue actually predates pokerogue, from what I could tell. Emerald Rogue's GitHub page has releases and patch notes going back to 2022, while the furthest evidence of pokerogue dates to early 2024. I'll be transparent in saying I'm really not a big fan of pokerogue. I feel that it branches out too far into its own thing, where it barely even resembles Pokemon anymore, at least to me. Whenever the Pokemon's level goes past 100 and there's all this stupid bullshit on the screen, I feel like I'm looking at one of those images that's making fun of all the overstimulating modern game design. So for that reason, we're really not going to be mentioning Pokerogue in this video. There's plenty of other Pokerogue content out there if you're wanting to look for it, so, go crazy. Quick aside, I am extremely surprised that there is no video comparing Emerald Rogue to Pokerogue. Free video idea. Anyways, moving on. So as we've covered so far, the most abstract aspect of completing a Pokemon game is the gym and the Elite Four run. While other challenge runs are randomized, shuffled around versions of already existing Pokemon games, Emerald Rogue is a ROM hack that'll have you place into an entirely new environment. You'll get to choose your appearance, adjust your settings, eventually choose your starter, and you're off onto your first run. Emerald Rogue functions by having you move to the end of a route that you choose. These routes are filled with overworld Pokemon and trainers, and they will cap your level based on what gym you're at. XP gain is very, very fast, meaning a few battles will make you reach level cap very quickly. This means you'll be spending the majority of your time battling trainers, catching Pokemon, or even trying to find items as you try to complete the route and reach the next stage. The Pokemon in the level will be based on the environment that you choose, with titles like Verdant, meaning that there will be more grass-type Pokemon, and things like Icy, meaning you'll be encountering more ice types, so on and so forth. The overworld that Emerald Rogue uses for its level choice screen is a very good example of what can be done with the Gen 3 engine, but also doubles as a very interesting game mechanic for your run. For example, I may want to choose an easier or harder route based on if the path later has a good reward for me down the line. It adds depth to your choices by making you consider what is good now and what's going to be good later. Like, for example, there is a PC on the overworld sort of level selection screen that shows up late in the run, and that'll let you get some of your Pokemon back. So even if you have to go through a hard route to get to that PC, it's going to be worth it because you'll get, your cracked out Pokemon back. So as I mentioned before, the XP gain in Emerald Rogue is jacked up to the point where building your team from the Pokemon available on a route can be done in pretty much like a couple minutes, honestly. This leads to a very reasonably paced experience, in my opinion, where a run can reach the Elite Four in about like 1 or 2 hours, just depending on the player, depending on what your playstyle is, what kind of Pokemon you have. Out of that 2 hours, I would say that probably like 20% of it is catching or grinding Pokemon, which if you think about it is very low for a Pokemon game. The ROM hack is aware that If you're playing something like Emerald Rogue, you want to do a lot of like team building and battling, not grinding for XP, knowing that you're just going to wipe your run anyways, just due to the nature of the game. The overworld makes finding the Pokemon you want really quick and easy. There's natural speed up during the battle, so you're not holding down the speed up key on your emulator the entire time. It's difficult to state just how many quality of life changes are made by the mod because I've been playing it for so long. It's an amazing game and an excellent time sink. This game basically made me like Pokemon again after becoming disillusioned with the franchise in recent years. It made me appreciate something that I once cherished and held closely that now seemed like slop being peddled by shareholders into the mouth of fans who fell asleep at the wheel with their mouth open. But why? What does this free ROM hack have to have that $60 AAA experiences just don't? Well, it's just fucking fun, dude. It's fun. It's a fun game. I don't know what else to say. And while fun is entirely subjective, there are some things that definitely play a part in that, like the amount of expectations you have going into something. Emerald Rogue is a ROM hack with a non-existent price tag compared to a full-fledged $60 release by one of the formerly $60 by one of the biggest gaming releases in the world. I think most people will have different expectations going into either of them. Obviously, you're going to expect a lot less out of something like the indie ROM hack, and it'll be much easier for you to impress you. But still, it feels like modern Pokemon games just are missing something that's hard to put a finger on. And I'm far from the first one to point this out. There's so many YouTube videos, YouTube essays about why modern Pokemon sucks. I mean, you can go watch the 13-hour BDSP review if you really need something like that. I mentioned the F word, fun, because I do think that fun is what makes Emerald Rogue so fun. It takes the formula of something that we all know and love, Pokemon, obviously, and steals like certain qualities of it while, not retaining all the qualities of it to become sort of an amalgamation of something new and something comforting familiar. It's almost like it's spinning off of what we know about Pokemon. Spin off Pokemon spin off. It pretty much hit me while I was playing Emerald Rogue on my modded Switch on a road trip that this game really just reminds me of the spin-off Pokemon games that were basically always my favorite growing up, come to think of it. The Pokemon spin-offs basically encapsulate any game that starts with Pokemon and doesn't end with version. I guess that would also discount the trading card game, which we aren't really going to talk about in this video. The first Pokemon spin-offs would probably be either Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium, or Pokemon Pinball, although weirdly enough, a lot of places like Bulbapedia and Wikipedia don't consider Stadium to be spin-offs. Either way, spin-off is just a game to describe a game with Pokemon in it that isn't a creature-catching RPG like the main series games. The side series games range from stuff like Pokemon Rumble to Detective Pikachu. I mentioned the oldest Pokemon spin-offs, but what are the newest Pokemon spin-offs? Surely with the Switch, Nintendo's first truly portable console, the Pokemon spin-offs can really spread their wings, right? This is an absolutely awful fucking lineup we have here. Pokken Tournament DX is a great game that was released during the Obama administration, yet still has the audacity to be not only fully priced at $60, but also ask me for $20 to play Blastoise and Celebi. Pokemon Tekken sounds like the perfect game to pull out on the boys' night, but that price tag is insane! $80 for a game whose online lobbies are emptier than a Republican Pride Parade? Sign me up! Mystery Dungeon DX is a solid remake for sure, but where's your brother? I think when they released a remake of the first Mystery Dungeon game, everyone was expecting that Nintendo was using this game as a little bit of a warm-up to tackle the Mystery Dungeon game that's consistently lauded as one of the best games that Nintendo has ever made, Explorers of Sky. Well, we all got rug pulled into buying this fucking game because the Explorers of Sky remake never came out. And honestly, that doesn't really take away... It doesn't take away from this game being like a very serviceable remake of the original. Honestly, I think there's like very minor differences between this one and the original. Mostly improvements. Mostly one or two things changed for the worst. I really don't think there's not a lot to complain about here besides the fact that they didn't remake the good game. Sorry, the better game. I just think it leaves a bad taste in the mouth in retrospect when they didn't follow it up with the game that most people consider to be superior. If anybody actually likes the first or second Explorers of Darkness, if anybody likes the other mystery dungeon games that aren't Explorers of Sky better, let me know, because I've never heard anyone say that before, up until this point. So let me know if that is your favorite, because I would be interested in hearing that. Pokemon Unite is a live service game, a MOBA that has been left to rot in recent years by most accounts. The game is much more simple than other entries in the genre, meaning that even League of Legends players could probably play it. While the game was very well received on launch in 2021, by 2025, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody telling you that the game is in a good spot right now. The consensus seems to be that the game is focusing much more on adding cosmetics as opposed to fixing game issues or adding new content. I'm going to believe it since I haven't touched this game since like 2022 at the latest, and I pretty much forgot it existed until I was making this video. It's technically still playable, it's not shut down or anything, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear bad news about it soon, honestly. New Pokemon Snap. Oh wait, this is actually a fully complete single-player experience, isn't a remake, doesn't require an online connection, and actually seems to deliver on an interesting concept within the Pokemon universe that isn't just creature catching and exploration, even if it is a concept we've seen before. It would be cool if this wasn't the only fucking Pokemon game like this in the entire 10-year lifespan of the Switch. So, let's reiterate on the Pokemon spin-off games on the Switch. Pokken. Great game. Ruined by greed. Mystery Dungeon DX. Great game. Played it when I was 10. Don't really need to play it again. Where's your brother? Pokemon Unite. Great game. Ruined by greed. Pokemon Snap 2. Great game. Not really ruined by anything. Thanks, Nintendo. But why the fuck is this still $60? My son was born when this game was announced. He starts school this year, and you still want me to pay $60 to take pictures of Pikachu? Man, I can't afford this fucking shit. I probably don't need to explain to the people watching this the absolute LeBron James level run that the Pokemon spin-offs had in the DS and Wii era. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Pokepark, Pokemon Rumble, Pokemon Ranger. Those games probably birthed just as many lifelong Pokemon fans as the mainline series. These spin-offs were games that abstracted Pokemon down to their basics of creatures creaturing and came out with something familiar yet new and exciting. Does that remind you of anything else? Thanks for unpausing. I'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room that I'm sure more than one person has thought at this point, which is that Nintendo does make Pokemon spin-offs, they're just mobile games now. And that wouldn't be entirely wrong, I suppose, but let's look at the mobile offerings from Nintendo, shall we? Pokemon Quest. This game sucks. It being a Pokemon game is the most interesting thing about it. Pokemon Masters EX. This is a gacha game. The only gameplay you're doing is navigating menus and gambling. Pokemon Sleep. This is a data collection service disguised as a video game. Pokemon Smile. This is a data collection service disguised as a video game. Pokemon Unite. This is a data collection service disguised as a video game. Pokemon Go. This is a data collection service disguised as a video game. Pokemon Go is by far the most popular Pokemon mobile game, even counting the mobile release of Unite, and no doubt brought the series from geek territory into something more mainstream when it exploded onto the scene in 2016. Pokemon Go was practically a victim of its own success, with its release in 2016 marking a turning point for the series in terms of focusing more on mobile offerings, or really just a shit ton of Pokemon Go content. The reception on Pokemon Go has fluctuated over the years, and as someone who's played it on and off, I'm not really at liberty to talk about the state of the game and how it's evolved. All we really need to know for today's video is that it was a massively popular Pokemon mobile game that's now bloated, full past the brim with microtransaction and pay-to-win business models. Niantic selling the game to the creators of Monopoly Go does not bode well for the game's future. These mobile games attempt to abstract Pokemon down to a science in a different way than we're used to, trying to figure out what will max out our screen time and shareholder profits. Now, Pokemon is a billion-dollar franchise. It would be a fool's errand. That's slang for fucking stupid. It would be a fool's errand to argue that the franchise wasn't always about the money. Pokemon Red and Blue was a dinky RPG launched by an absolute nobody game studio for the Game Boy, a handheld that was pretty much seen as obsolete by the time of the game's release. Although it may have started as an artistic project for the small, dusty game studio of Game Freak, it evolved into a corporate monster just as soon as it began exploding in popularity. With that being said, It feels like there's something completely different about the creative process behind creating and shipping a product like Pokemon Ranger and Pokemon Masters EX. While something like Ranger is designed to be consumed once or twice, with a sense of contentment, sort of like an actual meal, live service or gacha games are the equivalent of holographic meatloaf. Something that looks and feels satisfying at first glance, but after a while begins to pale when compared to anything with real substance. Oh boy. This guy's bringing up food analogies in his game review again. However, games like Masters EX or Go can generate revenue even long after they're released or downloaded, bringing in long-term revenue for the company as opposed to one simple purchase. The irony of this being that digital content that you paid for is never guaranteed to stay in your possession, as opposed to physical media. I bought my copy of Pokemon Ranger 10 years ago. Well, my mom bought it for me. How much money did the Pokemon company make after the initial purchase? 0. Big fat goose egg. That can't be said about live service games, unfortunately. A game like Pokemon Conquest would never be made today due to the soaring costs of modern game development, which is also another reason that Pokemon spin-offs have slowed to a crawl. There's simply no profit incentive to develop a spin-off game that is a one-time revenue gain, as opposed to a live service game that's a drip feed of revenue coming in every time you push out a new update. Just as a reminder, this video is still about Emerald Rogue. I'm bringing all this up about modern Pokemon just to say that Emerald Rogue clears a ton of modern Pokemon games for many reasons. The cost of entry is extremely low. The game is fun. It doesn't waste your time or try to squeeze money out of you after you've downloaded it. There is customization that feels like it is user-focused instead of profit incentive-focused. I can play the game without an internet connection. The difficulty is rough but fair. The tutorials aren't overbearing and annoying to a ridiculous degree. The ROM hack is faithful to the original games while adding in new features that don't diminish the charm of the originals that it's paying homage to. It's difficult to describe what is done right because so many things are done right, they kind of fail to stick out in my memory after putting in 100 hours into the ROM hack. There are a few things that I do think could be done better. For example, some of the progression on the hub world is a bit confusing. Like, for example, I didn't exactly make the connection that the daycare in the hub world would allow me to take out those same Pokemon that I was putting in the hub world into, I'd be able to pick them up during my run. So maybe that's on me, but I think there's enough discourse online, on Reddit and stuff, that you can pretty much figure out any answer to a question that you need. So I don't think it's too bad. The creator of the ROM hack did say they are done updating it, which is a shame, but, people do move on from stuff in their life. I do think the ROM hack is in a good spot. I think it's been left in a good spot. I think other people could definitely expand on it if they wanted to, or I would definitely be excited for the original creator to make an update if she ever does want to make an update. So, shout out Pokabby. I suppose my thesis statement for this video would be this. Emerald Rogue made me rediscover my love for a franchise that I had long since discarded. I truly thank Pokabby, the creator of this ROM hack, for making something that could make me feel as human as I did when I was mashing the A button and tracing circles on my Nintendo in the back of my parents' car. Being a human is something that the Pokemon Company and Nintendo could certainly do a better job of sticking to as of late. It seems like they do well to heed the words of the late Satoru Iwata, former president and CEO of Nintendo.
On my business card, I am a corporate president. In my mind, I am a game developer. But in my heart, I am a gamer.
One thing is for sure. These fucking Nintendo guys are not getting another cent out of me. Not now, not never. I never even liked Pokemon.
The money got different. Cause of what I'm spending. The money got different.
Oh, it's
Cause of what I'm
Magneton!
spending. The money
KO'd
got
by one
different.
hit! It
Cause
scattered
of what I'm
spikes!
spending. The money got different. Cause of what I'm spending. The money nothing to me. To me it's like paper and cheese. And I keep it wherever I go. My money long like flamingo. When haters see me, they mouth drop. My money colorful like floor shop. Puts me in VIP with a model, that's top chop. The champagne, they go.